All right, how about now? Are we live?
Yes.
We are live. Hope you can hear me okay. Welcome to this Far West System Center User Group meeting, our first since, well, quite a while actually. We've been a little bit of slacking on these, but we are definitely ramping up for more of these. And it's easy when it's online too, because more people can join and, well, makes life easier for everybody. So throughout these 3.5, 4 hours that we'll be here, we absolutely love questions. So please use the Q&A in the webinar meeting to send in questions if you have any. And if anyone can just confirm that the audio is coming in okay, I'll be a happy camper. I mean, I can obviously hear myself very well, but the rest of the world would be interesting to see if there is audio. Any comments at all will be thankful.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Do not make me have to open my panel. Thumbs up. That's awesome. So I've been designated as the keynote speaker for today, and the topic for today is back to school. We have a few exciting speakers joining us. We have Chris Jackson who's going to join us for 2 sessions, one related to security and one related to Microsoft Edge in the enterprise. You probably learned or seen that Microsoft is doing a lot of work with enhancing Edge to even open source version of it. That's pretty cool. And then we have Aniket joining us for a deep dive into desktop analytics, natural sort of evolvement of what used to be Windows Analytics. Well, still exists, but some fun stuff there as well. And again, we love questions, so all of the speakers feel happy or feel free to join in and ask questions when needed. Back to school is the topic. So what basically happened over summer? Well, for those of you into ConfigMgr, and that's typically all of you joining these kind of meetings, there are some exciting things that has been released. The biggest one, of course, is ConfigMgr 1906, which I would say is one of the biggest releases yet of ConfigMgr current branch. There is absolutely, it will be impossible to cover every single change in only 30 minutes, but I'm going to do my best. I have picked out my highlights, and I'm going to show some of them to you. All right, I actually keep a note here as well, so not forgetting anything. One thing I would like to start with is a bit of word of warning. You might have heard of this little thing being much more secure than the previous release, but had a 1 in the end. Starting with 1906, the ConfigMgr client requires that you have that code signing support on your machine, which is a no-brainer if you're on Windows 10 or Server 2016, 2019, whatever. But if you are on older stuff like Windows 7 or 2008 R2, make sure those are patched so you have support for that release. Otherwise, it'll be interesting to deploy that client, put it that way. But I figured we could start off a little bit easy. I hope the screen is coming out okay. Running a fancy full HD resolution, so 1920 by 1080, which is cool if you have a 4K monitor, but maybe not so cool if you're on a phone. Anyhow, this is my 1906 site server. As you can see, it's been fairly recently upgraded. And starting off lightly, if you go to site, and if you actually click your maintenance tabs down here, you will have a good view about what's actually going on with them as well. Much easier overview than just right-clicking and try to figure out what's going on from this end of the scene. So nice addition there, for sure. Other things that you realize when you do the upgrade these days. So basically, when you're running the upgrade, you might check the status for it, and hopefully it shows something useful during the upgrade itself. What you will see now in the installation node is actually the most critical piece of the upgrade itself, it's usually the upgrade of the database. So this one will give you more insight if something goes wrong during that upgrade as well. So that's a nice thing. It will actually tell you what process that interfere with it, etc., etc. Additions or enhancements in the desktop analytics support, and Aniket is going to talk more about that later, so I'm not going to steal his thunder right there for there, but 1906 is fully supported with desktop analytics. That's nice. Other stuff in ConfigMgr that I absolutely love is the changes that the team are doing for real-time queries, real-time operations. And that means the fast channel, I mean, it's been around for a good few years now. Primarily has been used to get updates from the client and push notifications down to them. But now we can do more things. Back a year ago, Microsoft added in the ability to run scripts directly from the console using that same fast channel. So it runs pretty quickly. But recently, there have been a lot of improvements in the CMPivot little application. So if I go to a collection, have a few running machines, and the key is that they need to be running without the fast channel, looking good. That will be very little queries down to those computers. But I can go back to that node again. I can right click and start to either run a script or a query, and technically a query is a script in the back end anyway. So if I want to figure out that stuff is actually working, I can start to do some real-time queries in the environment. That is not the real-time query, but here are a few examples. For example, show me all auto start software on a given device or all devices in a collection, whatever. So I can copy that query in and use. And if there are any on this machine, that will show up in this list nicely. Most queries, they end up and finish up in less than half a minute. Even in large environments, we can run this in batches of like 5,000 machines with no problem at all. And it spits the results back pretty quickly. So I can see that PC number one in this case did have a few startup applications. And yeah, this is a good way to finding out what they are. What Microsoft added in 1906 is the ability to actually use like join operations. I can combine different results. So for example, this one here, which is querying the computer system, it joins that information with operating systems, so I can have a sort of a combined output of those. And you can see the output now on my machines in this collection. But you can do a lot of fun things with CMPivot, and every release of ConfigMgr, you will see that they're adding in more and more and more stuff here for you to query. One thing they also added in are boot times for things. So the ability to add or list network connections. So if you actually go to the ConfigMgr team website, that's the old archive I was playing around with, so never mind that one. I actually thought Vista would take off back in the day, so I actually had a blog back in 2006 that was named Deploy Vista. I later buried that blog, but it's still there, still around. SCCM 1906 features. And here we go. If you go to CMPivot in that list, here we go. And scroll down a little bit. This image quality is interesting, but here is a query for a collection where we're looking at things like start time, boot duration, and you can see, for example, how long time group policy processing took on these machines. Very quickly, apparently, a bunch of VMs, but I think you get the idea. The ability to track and ask for things like that in real time, it's pretty powerful. I like this feature a lot, and I've been using it basically every single day the last 2 weeks, working with customers and stuff, trying to figure out things, what's going on in their environment. So that's cool. And also in 1906, there is a standalone version of this. So you don't need to run it or start it from the console itself. So if you go to the, let's see where I put it, here. If you go to the installation directory, the ConfigMgr, so in this case, my E drive, program files, Microsoft Config Manager, tools, there's a CM Pivot MSI that you can install, and obviously it shows up as a little MSI in the here as well in the system, and it will be available on your start menu as a separate application. So if you just want to do queries, you can just launch this app and have fun. You can save and export, import queries, etc., create collections from them, and whatever you need to do. Other things that are related to more of the, do we have any questions, by the way, before I?
Yes, one question about enabling TLS in 1906.
So there was a question related to enable TLS, I'm assuming TLS 1.2. We haven't done it, or I haven't done it for any customers yet. We did do it, a trial about a year ago, but back then ConfigMgr was not really ready for it. So we started to basically run into all sorts of problems until we switched it back, and that was for a TLS 1.2 only, where they actually, through hardening, have disabled all the other stuff. But from now on, ConfigMgr should fully support it. I just haven't done any implementation of it yet, so sorry about that one. I don't have any more info. I know that the native client for SQL needs to be upgraded to support it, and the upgrade will actually warn you if you haven't. So just download the latest one of that one, so you have it. All right. There are some changes in networking in 1906, where sort of client networking, so in the monitoring node, if you start to look at the client data sources, what you will see now is that they also include now delivery optimization traffic in this report. So you can track that as well. But please note, it's only DO traffic that ConfigMgr generates, the ConfigMgr client generates. And right now, as of today, that's not much. That agent typically does things on its own for the built-in updates for Windows 10 apps or stuff like that. But down the road, you will see that the ConfigMgr is working very closely to, the ConfigMgr team is working really closely to the delivery optimization team. And going forward, that's when we're going to see a lot of improvements in terms of peer-to-peer solutions, etc., for more ConfigMgr content. So the next year is probably going to be quite exciting in that sense. And speaking of exciting things for delivery optimization, already in 1906, there is a pre-release / beta feature that you can enable on your distribution point. This is in the full 1906 current branch release, so you don't need a technical preview for this, but there is a magic checkbox that was added to the DP. This one here. Enable this DP to be used as a DOINC server. Delivery optimization in network cache spells DOINC when you shorten it up a little bit. What it basically means is that your distribution points are able to store and cache content that clients would normally get directly from Microsoft. So let me demonstrate to you my extreme skills in Microsoft Paint. This is a favorite of mine, but this is what's being changed. So imagine that you have a distributed environment. So you have multiple sites, you have a headquarters, you have a branch office, the usual stuff. You probably have a lot more of the branch office ones, but you get the idea. And then you also have some kind of internet connection. So yes, this is an internet connection. Just gonna upgrade it to real internet. Here we go. This is internet, big I. So say that you have a 45 megabit fancy internet connection, and then you have maybe a 10 in between your offices. Before DOINC, when you deploy a Windows 10 box down here in the branch office, or if you upgraded an older Windows 7 or Windows 8 machine to Windows 10, they are both simply gonna go directly to internet to grab updates for the built-in apps in Windows 10 and any other store application that you use on these machines. And that's a lot of data. That can easily be well over a gig in the initial, after the upgrade, and then a few hundred megs every single month to these machines. However, they are all going from internet and back over the WAN link and the internet pipe as well, unless you start to implement peer-to-peering in between these clients. However, with the Doink server in place, so you have your distribution point up here. So this is your DP. You enable Doink, and now the queries from the clients are going to go here. The Doink server will, if it's not in their cache already, it's going to get it from internet. It's going to put it back in its cache, so here, and then it's going to feed that back to the client. So you are reducing traffic up here by having the DP cache that content. And also a cool thing is that the client here, do not need to have internet access. The DP obviously need to, but the client doesn't. And I know that's been a lot of concern having internet access in certain environments, especially more regulated environments. So now, not only do we offload internet access, you're also removing the requirement for having internet access on the clients. They still will peer-to-peer, happily peer-to-peer, and should. So that's something you should configure, because if you guys do this right, you can reduce about 90% of the WAN traffic by allowing clients to peer-to-peer to each other. I'm not going to go more into that, but I do have a blog post that I wanted to show you. Not that one, but deployment research. That I, by the way, recently upgraded to WordPress, finally. People been nagging me for a good few years. And now you can read it on the phone. The old one was more or less impossible. But and apparently you need to type correctly. I didn't fix that in the blog yet, that you have to type correctly. I have a guide to basically everything related to peer-to-peer. So it's a good starting point if you want to play around with that, is to go through those little exercises and guides that are provided. So that's cool stuff. Yes, so other things that was introduced was a new version of Support Center. For those of you that haven't used Support Center, it's a fantastic tool for troubleshooting ConfigMgr clients, why the heck they're not getting their policies and what's in their cache and stuff like that, and reviewing their log files. So here I have a Windows 10 client on which I installed the latest Support Center tool. These days, you don't have to download it from Microsoft. It's included in the ConfigMgr installation. So if I go to my site server, go to the Tools folder. This is where you find the Support Center folder, and this is the latest Support Center tool. So let me see if I can get Zoom and running on this guy. So this is the tool, and when you install it, it shows up as usual in the Microsoft System Center something here. This is where you see the Support Center tool, but you also have a new log viewer. So Support Center come with its own. So now you have three. You have See and Trace, which since a few versions back is always included in the client folder. So in Windows CCM, there is always See and Trace available, useful. Only took them 10 years to figure that one out. And then Support Center adds its own little log viewer. And then there is a third log viewer called OneTrace. So if you open up OneTrace, I happen to have it here on my start menu. You see it looks a little bit different than See and Trace, but you can still open log files with it, surprisingly enough. But when you start to do your search filter and stuff, you have some options to actually save and export those and keep them for later use. So again, pre-release feature, but absolutely start to play around with it. It's pretty cool. Other than that, if you haven't already used Support Center, do take some time off this weekend and play around with it, or possibly later this week as well, works. But you can easily connect to your agent, get some information. You can start to check policies, meaning the settings that have been applied to this machine. And you can start to poke around and go in to see what's actually going on. Sometimes when you have clients that's simply not behaving after an upgrade, I've seen success in actually resetting that policy if needed. But also for content, where I can peek into my what's actually installed on this machine in terms of applications. Useful. I can peek into the cache and see what's actually in there and what is what. Now, I could browse for the file system too, but this is kind of nice. And of course, I have the inventory, do the software, hardware inventory stuff, troubleshooting, and the second logs viewer that is available. What I like about this one is that it actually has ready-made groups for common stuff that you troubleshoot. So for example, if you need to troubleshoot software updates, there is a group with all the software update related log files combined into the same view. So you don't have to remember all their names, you don't have to merge them in same trace, you can just open them from here. All right. Let's see. Any other questions coming in? People are taking notes, I take. All right. This one. This was added in 1906. So this is the ability to group applications together in a group that you can deploy. It does have some prereqs on how you set it up, but this is a pretty cool addition as well. And there are actually a ton of application improvements in 1906. So if you go back to their website, in the end of that little post, they have the whole shebang for, let's see here, application management that was changed in 1906. So the application groups I mentioned, the retry retrieve approved apps, and also some changes to the how the workflow is for those approvals. So that's kind of nice. And you can also filter applications that are deployed to device, so categories and stuff. And this is more when you do like when you have a lot of them and you allow users to request them on their own. So that's cool. Other things that were changed in 1906 was if you start to look into doing co-management stuff, meaning have ConfigMgr, Intune, share workloads. When you set this up, I'm just going to verify I have internet access, otherwise this is going to be an embarrassing demo. All right. It's also now available in government cloud, by the way. Speaking of it, it was recently changed. So this is where you see the workloads. And now you can have different pilots, different device collections for each workload. Before 1906, you have to put everything in the same bucket, which was kind of hard when you want to do testing or you just want to test a few things at a time. Yeah, speaking of that. Not related so much for 1906, but if you haven't played around with it already, start investing some time to use the cloud management gateway to catch machines that you have that is not on premise. So you are making so you have the ability to get inventory, to deploy updates and applications, and even sequences to machines that are anywhere in the world. So they are still under your management, even though they are not on site with you guys. It's a little bit interesting to set up. It takes some some learning on how it works, but it's done with about an hour, the whole setup and the sync process and everything, and it's not that costly either. Even if you have a few thousand clients, it's rarely more than a few $100s a month. So $400 or $500 at least, or at most, to manage a few thousand devices through this. As usual with Azure-related services, you pay for usage, but it's really not using that much of resources. And most of the customers, they only need a single Azure VM for CMG, and it's simply not that costly. I mean, just the sheer ability to manage clients is worth more than that easily. Probably paying a few $100s to manage one client if it's the right client for that kind of money. On a yearly basis, of course, it adds up, but yeah, no big deal. So, any final questions from the audience? All right, then it's my pleasure to leave over the table. That was a question.
I have a question. About test sequence debugger, will this give you more specifics on the issue with the task sequence instead of just
So the task sequence debugger, that's actually also a nice feature in 1906. To enable it, you can either, when you deploy a sequence, you can say I want to debug this. So if I pick a sequence here, no, sorry, it's down here. It's a debug option. But if you're lazy, which I am most of the time, if you go to a collection, and in this case, my all unknown computers, and do properties, collection variables, I'm adding in tdebug mode true. And when I've done that, I can go to a client. I'm taking this client here. I'm going to pixie boot it. And in this environment, I'm using the WDS less pixie because Microsoft kind of broke the built-in one recently. I switched over to use that one instead. Works beautifully. So I'm going to show you the debugger in just a second here. What I see customers forget when they upgrade to 1906 is they forget to update their boot images. And if you don't add the latest binaries for the boot image into the boot image, you don't get the new features like the sequence debugger. So then that variable I set, it will basically do nothing. So if you enable that and you don't still see things happening, make sure that your boot images are up to date, and they should always be up to date. Come on. I'm going to pick a sequence. It's going to launch the debugger. So now I can start to, to step through the various action here. So either I can just step through them and see what's going on, or I can go to a given location, and from here I can start, for example, to run the sequence from here. And I can set breaks and stuff where I want it to stop. And then I can do a run, and it goes to that. So that simplifies debugging a lot. So can you repeat the question again?
Are you going to get more than just an error code, basically, in testing?
So if I'm also the comment is basically, will I get additional information here? Not really, except for that you have the variables where you actually see what's going on as part of the debugger. So that's some additional information that you otherwise would have to run a little script to enumerate. So I absolutely love this little feature. It's great stuff. So yeah. Alrighty. Enough of this for a while, and let us welcome Mr. Chris Jackson. Is he on the call already?
Yeah, we have a 15-minute break.
We have a break first.
Yeah.
Ooh, my bad. Most embarrassing part is I even read the schedule or wrote the schedule, so should have remembered that one. All right, let's take a quick break and we will welcome Chris Jackson in
At 11:45 Central. 15 minutes.
15 minutes. All right. See you in a bit. Have some coffee and whatever you need. Thanks.